Madison. Welcome back to another episode of
Marky.
Shotgun Wisdom. So, Miss Madison, here we are again, episode 3.
Yeah, 3.
And I hear you have a very heavy subject you want to discuss. You want to tackle some serious issue.
It's not just like issues, but like, yeah, sure.
Well, just topic. What I meant is
a serious
more
topic.
serious topic, things that are much more profoundly impacting not just you, but people all across America.
Yeah.
So, how you been, first of all?
School starting.
Oh, yeah, the dreaded back to school. But anyhow, let's dive right into it. Let's jump in.
Yeah, so today we're discussing racial identity. Yeah, so racial identity, my racial identity specifically, I guess a little bit of your racial identity. And
I don't have a racial identity problem.
You're not, I never said
crisis.
a problem. I'm just saying discussing it in general.
Okay.
So yeah, discussing my racial identity as a biracial, half black, half white child growing up, and how that has formed my perception of the world and how it's evolved as I've grown. Speaking
of that, let's start with the basic. First of all, how do you at this moment in your own skin, what is your feeling about your racial identity in terms of where you are today?
Well,
and we could unpack it and go back to the genesis of what got you to this point.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a very light overview because I wanted to go chronologically, but okay.
Okay, well, do it that way then.
Okay, so let's go all the way back to little Maddie. And so when I was a little kid, I spent more time around my mom than my dad, like as most kids I think do. My mom primarily worked from home when I was like really little growing up before and during preschool. And then you were like off working and stuff. So I would see my dad at night, but I was around my mom a lot. And as much as Marky doesn't want to hear this, I think most daughters want to hear that they look like their mom and not their dad. And then later on, we're okay with the dad thing. But your perception is like, oh, well, I don't want to look like a man. Like I want to look like my mom.
Because people said to you look like your dad when you were smaller.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which that has also changed. But yeah. So my mom is a white woman.
Why do you say
white? Because like it's just funny.
German.
A white woman from Slovakia, so Eastern European, Central Europe. Yeah. And so she came here, immigrated here, met my dad. And so my mom is very much like culturally Slovakian. Like she's definitely assimilated quite a bit, but it's impacted like how I grew up and like how I perceived like everything. So I was always into dolls. I still, like dolls.
Yeah, I remember
and stuff.
them well,
yeah.
very well.
Love the dolls. Collection. Yeah. And I was obsessed with American Girl dolls. My favorite princess was Rapunzel. Yeah. So I had an American Girl doll, my first ever American Girl doll I picked out by myself with my mom, but I picked it out. Like she had no pull in it at all. And I picked a green-eyed, blonde-haired white doll named Caroline from like the historical collection or whatever, because that's just that's just what I thought was beautiful, because my mom is a very beautiful woman, and plus she's your mom, so everyone like thinks their mom is the most beautiful woman, even though I think my mom might actually be, but whatever.
Okay.
That's another discussion. But yeah, so I always wanted to emulate what my mom put out there. So that's who she was, and turned to me very much not green-eyed, very much not blonde-haired, very much I look like my race is put together. Like I think I'm a pretty half and half looking person. So
I would say you look more like a Nubian queen.
Okay, well, again, we'll get into that as well as like perception. But yeah, so don't like look like my mom in the way of we don't have the same not that we don't have the same features, because I definitely have features from my mom, but
Yeah,
what
I
would you
think
say
you
the
have.
same,
I
we're
think
not
you
the
have
same
your.
color palette.
Well, of course not, because your
Yeah.
mom's a
I
white-blooded
know.
European, but you do have the same facial structure. Your features,
Yeah.
your high cheekbones, the big, broad forehead and face. Not that it's a bad thing. It's
Yeah,
not a
I know.
negative. It accentuates your features and just brings it all together because spatially everything is in proportion.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have this big face and
Yeah.
forehead that's out of proportion.
And that's kind of ties into like the evolution of my whole perception of myself, is also like, I grew up, kids mostly telling me like, oh, I remember like core memory drop right here. Had aftercare and you guys were always late to pick me up. Anyway, and so I was in like the late office and there was these two girls who were like, not really my friends. Like they were kind of fake friends, but whatever. And my mom picked me up. She came in with her little like, her blonde hair and, her Eastern European self, and picking me up. I come next to my mom and they go, "That's your mom? Like that can't be your mom. Like she doesn't look like you at all." And my mom turned around. She goes, "Excuse you?" And I was just like, yeah, like that's my
Sounds
mom.
like her.
Yeah, I know, literally, like she really stood up for me. But anyway, yeah, so I realize now that like back then, like people just just because I'm not the same color as her, like doesn't mean I don't look like her. So I'm saying like it's
But
funny.
did that particular exchange bother you, and
Yeah,
why?
that
Why
bothered
did that
me.
bother you?
It bothered me because it was just like, again, every like daughter wants to look like their mom.
And we're talking what,
This
7 years
was
old, 7 years old,
this was elementary school, so I'd probably say I was like 8, 9.
8 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So young. Like young. And yeah. And just people, even like this was way before I was born, but like my mom would wheel me around my stroller in Slovakia and people would be like, "Oh, are you the babysitter?" Like,
We mean before you were born?
yeah, or not before I was born. Sorry,
was like,
before
how is that possible?
before I was conscious. Like I don't remember this or anything, but my mom told me this, or maybe you told me, or both of you guys told me, but whatever. Like, so yeah, and it's funny how, and it's kind of ironic how now like I get that I look like my mom like a lot, but it's just not in that like way of, oh,
Same palette.
the
Color
same
palette.
color palette. Like you don't have to be racially the same as your parent to look like them.
Well, yeah,
So,
because your facial, your bone, your
Yeah.
features, your structural features is very similar to your mom.
Yeah.
But, the texture, obviously,
yeah.
your hair and the different color palettes.
But now I get it
obviously.
all the time. Like my coaches say, like I'm built like my mom. I get my face looks like my mom. Like even my mom said that her like classmates told her on Facebook or whatever that I look like my mom when she was younger. Like whatever.
But let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Why you sound so proud of that as opposed to you look like your dad? What was wrong with that?
No. Okay.
It's,
I definitely
it's like a throwaway.
No,
like,
I
all of a
definitely-
sudden, now that I'm older, people are saying, "Oh, you definitely look like your mom."
No, because the thing is, I definitely think I look like both of you guys. Like I'm not one of those kids who looks like only like one parent or only like the other parent. Like Micah even says like I look like both of you guys. Like even my like the best feature to like describe that with is like my nose. Like I have my mom's like top half of her nose, and then the bottom half of my nose is your
And
nose.
see, that's the best part. The bottom half of your nose is that's
That's
just
the best
perfect.
part. We have the same shaped nostrils and everything. So like, yeah, I would say, and my eyes I get from like your side, and like, so yeah, there's definitely like a half and half mix, but the total like disregard of my mom purely because she's white is what bothered me as a child. Like,
Yeah.
I think.
So, okay, just to bring it back to, the point that's more important than just the fact that some kid dismissed you
Yeah.
and your racial identity. How did that in itself culminate or resonated with you over the years to the point where you felt like there was some distortion between who you thought you were or what you thought you looked like and what you actually looked like?
Yeah. It's not like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, but it was never that I thought that I think the opposite. I very much knew that I was different than her. And I knew that people like perceived me. And my mom has always been like, you're mixed, like emphasis on like, you are mixed, like
Yeah,
you are
with-
half
and-
white. And
Okay.
then wait. And then on the other side, you have my dad who's, you're black. You're black. You're a black kid. Like, you're black. Everyone sees you as black. And so I'm just like, as a kid, like my mom's sitting here telling me like I'm mixed, like Barack Obama is mixed. Like they're all mixed people. Like they're not black, they're mixed. And then my dad is like, oh, you're black. Like people perceive you as black. So I'm like, well, I know I'm not white. And I don't really think that people perceive me as completely black. So like what's going on here? And then also I remember a distinct memory is like when I like called you in the middle of the night one night, like this was further along. I think it must have been like 11 or 12 or something. And I was like, I don't look like other mixed kids. Like, cause the poster child is always like Zendaya. Like Zendaya is a half white, half black woman. And Zendaya's has a lot looser curl pattern. She's more on the like fair side, but you can tell that she's mixed. She has black features, but yeah. So just this kind of that I agree with that. This like identity crisis of you don't really know exactly where you fit in and how people perceive you and when you don't know how people perceive you, it's hard to perceive yourself. Like you have to find that by yourself.
And so let's just go back a little bit because you touched on the whole where your mom would emphasize that you were mixed.
Yeah.
And I would emphasize that you are a black child.
Yeah.
Because there was a deliberate emphasis that was placed consciously.
Yeah. I was going to
on
ask, why did you do that?
verbalizing
Yeah.
that between your mom and I. Because your mom, she's, as you said, Eastern European. So her sensibility of racial culture and cultural identity and racial identity is not necessarily in tune with the American history, so to speak. Your mom is just a person who just had a kid, and her kid is just her kid.
Yeah.
And her kid happened to be a mixed race kid. Your mom was never one of those people who went out, sought after. I wanted to have a black husband, a black boyfriend, to have a black
she
kid.
wasn't,
She was never that. And it was never that kind of celebrated emphasis on, oh, look at my mixed race baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because there's a difference and there's a distinction that needs to be made in terms of the consciousness that goes beyond or goes into raising a mixed race kid. Yeah. There are families who deliberately set out to say, well, you know what? I want to have a mixed race baby, so I'm going to find a woman from a separate or another race to have that kid with.
Which is problematic.
And it wasn't that for me,
It
wasn't that for her. Your mom, maybe it might be worth just explaining how I met your mom. Mm-hmm. I met your mom at a Starbucks in a coffee line, putting sugar into her coffee, and I was putting honey in my tea.
We don't need the whole love story, but
no, it's
you
not
guys
a love
met
story.
in a
It was just one of those things.
Whatever.
Like
It's
I
not
said
like
to her, because at the time I was traveling a lot to Europe, and she had an accent. So I said to her, "Are you German?" And she just looked at me like, "No, I'm not German." It's almost like an insult. Yeah. And that's kind of how we met and developed a rapport. And we kept going back to the same Starbucks, and I would see her there. So anyway, but back to the whole issue of the racial consciousness. Your mom was never in tune to American historical struggle with race.
So then you
she was always conscious of what's going on in contemporary society, of black people or police abusing black people or people prejudice against black people or racial slur. Those things she's conscious of. But I was more in tune historically to the struggle of the black Americans and black people all around the world. Clearly, I'm Caribbean based. That's my heritage. I'm Jamaican born. But we never had that struggle, so to speak, when I was growing up, because obviously, if you know the history of the Caribbean, my great-great-grandmother was a free person. Yeah. They were never enslaved. I grew up in a multicultural, multiracial society where, we have Chinese, we have Indians, we have, whites, we have amalgamation of all different races. Where I grew up around on a small island, and the schools that I went to was integrated with racial integration. I mean, best friends, I had white friends, I had half Chinese friends. We were just a mixing pot of all different races. So we never had that struggle. Nonetheless, coming here as a teenager to America, I was acutely aware of the racial struggle historically, by history and otherwise. So having a mixed race child for me, it was always my job, and I felt consciously, to make you aware at a very early age to understand your racial identity, meaning, yes, you are biracial, but on the street, when someone see you, not knowing your history, not knowing your familial structure, they can't identify, well, oh, because I've seen black people who have both black parents, mom and dad, just look identical or similar to you. And they had no white or other race in their bloodline.
Well, maybe not their immediate bloodline,
well, maybe
but yeah.
5-6 generations ago. But they were black people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and quite often people mistake them for mixed race people. And they're like, what do you mean? They get offended because, but I circle back to say this.
So what was the logic in the every white doll my mom bought me, the black doll from you, and the like Tiana cake and the, like, you know, oh, what's your favorite princess, Marky? Tiana.
Yes. Because you were a black kid, so to speak, just textually, visually, growing up in a white world. And what I mean by growing up in a white world, I meant the people around you.
Yeah.
The people that you were assimilated with, whether it was in school, whether it was daycare, whether it was friends, whether it was people that in your community, it was a predominantly white exposure, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want you to be the Lily Pulitzer kind of kid where you grew
like
up in
not in touch with my other half at all.
Have no identity or any attachment to your black identity apart from pointing a finger, go, oh, that's my dad.
Yeah.
And that would be your connection to blackness. I wanted you to understand what blackness is, because blackness, from my perspective, it's not just about race. Blackness personified culture. It personified consciousness. It personified a perspective on the world around you. And embracing that, you have to understand all the different fibers that make up the black experience. And the black experience was just not the color of one's skin. And it was about understanding the history of it, understanding the culture. So when your mom would buy you these white dolls, I felt it necessary because I wanted you to have the same exposure to something that you can identify with, whether it was curly hair like yours, whether it was the skin texture, or whether the color of the skin. And you can be proud of having that doll and realizing I can have my white doll, but I also have my black doll.
Yeah.
And there were none of the white one wasn't superior or better than the black one, or the black one was more dominant than the white one, but it was about choices.
Yeah.
And you were a composition of both.
Mm-hmm. So off that, I'll just talk about like my whole perspective, like growing up on that. So when like my dad would, you know, we'd go to the ballet and he'd be like, oh, well, you know, there's no other black people here. And I'm just like,
I'd say to you, what do you notice?
Oh, what do you notice? And I'm just like, nothing. And he's like, there's no other black people here. And I was just like, why does it matter? Why do you have to point this stuff out to me? Like, we're all on this rock loving each other, like whatever, like my whole perception. Cause like, again, I grew up in, I feel like, a relatively accepting area. Like I was never, like growing up, I never really remember, I mean, well, for later on, but in that period of time, like early childhood, I had never really faced anything with people, like, you know, nobody else pointed that kind of stuff out except you, is what I'm trying to say, bottom line. So I was just like, oh, Marky and his, like, you know, racial obsession, and he just wants to constantly, like, that stuff doesn't matter. Like, I'm mixed and I'm this and I'm not black and I'm half black, but I don't have to, like, you know, think about it like he does and all that stuff. So fast forward to, let's say, I don't know, I think middle school was a pivotal time for me. Not only
awakening.
What?
A rude awakening.
A rude awakening, I guess you could say. Cause yeah, like I'm trying to think back, like elementary school. I mean, I don't really remember anything
Because
like
you went to a very cookie cutter kind of,
a good
but it
school
was
with,
in a
yeah.
white neighborhood. It
But
was
there was diversity in my school though.
very small amount of diversity in terms of the neighborhood where you went
The
to
neighborhood
school.
itself, but the kids who went there,
Yeah,
it
it
felt
was a
like,
mixture.
yeah, it was a mixture. Everyone was mixed together. I had like I had a number. I had more black kids in my class there than I've like in my elementary school classes than I've had from like elementary school on. So like I'd say it was a diverse school. Like maybe because a lot
True,
of
but
kids,
your
because it was a
friends were all
neighborhood
white.
school.
But your friends were all white.
Yeah, but that's I didn't have a whole lot of friends like
No, again,
anyway.
friends by proximity, because the twins that you became good friends with at the
Yeah.
time was
But that was
your
a
mom worked for
family
their
thing,
dad,
family friend
and so
kind
you
of thing.
knew them through that, and you both went to
Yeah.
the same daycare.
But I'm just
and all
saying
that.
like the school was I'd call it a diverse school. I don't know what it looks like now, but because
No, it was
Yeah.
diverse. But I'm
and
saying,
so anyway, fast forward to middle school. My middle school was a predominantly Black Hispanic school. However, I was in a magnet program within the school. And then within that magnet program, I was in an even smaller program that was like the GEM program, which we'll get into the whole gifted gem and how that affects kids in another episode. But anyway, whatever. So I was in this program within a school within a school within a school, like ridiculous. And there was no interaction between us and it was called progressive, whatever, general population. Besides
Gen
that,
Pop, you sound like you're in prison.
well, you said that's what you
Gen
would
Pop.
used to call it, Gen Pop. I'm like the progressive kids, what they would call it, whatever. Except at lunch and everything else, like totally. You never see them in the hallway. My 7th and 8th grade, we were outside. Like all of the magnet classes were outside, and all the regular classes were inside. So we didn't even see them like in the halls. Like it was like it felt like we were going to like a totally different school. Anyway, however, I rode the bus for a hot minute when I was going to that school, and the buses were not segregated. Like they were not. We all rode in the same bus, and I lived in an apartment building. And so right next to my apartment building, like downtown Fort Lauderdale, but it's Flagler Village. So you're like encroaching on Sistrunk, basically. Like they're, going into that area. And so there was a lot of all Black kids on the bus, all Black kids, except my one friend from the neighborhood apartment building. And she didn't come into like late middle school. So anyway, whatever. So I just started I'm looking around, I'm seeing these kids, I'm listening to them, they're talking to me, whatever. And over the years, I just kind of realized I was like, damn, these kids have it so much harder than me. Because obviously I would, my parents are very much news inclined. I'd hear about all kinds of stuff. I knew a good amount about history, but this was the first time that I really experienced it.
Experienced what? What
experienced the difference in the majority, in a majority white school versus a majority Black school. This school, severely underfunded, shortage of desks, not the greatest teachers. I think a lot of the time, most of my teachers were great, but I mean,
because you were in the school within the school.
So, and there was some good, I know one or two progressive teachers, and they were good, some of them, but just a severely underfunded school, and the way that these kids would talk about their lives at home and all that kind of stuff. And it was just wow, being in such close proximity, and also seeing the difference in coming from still, I guess you could, a diverse but majority white, or majority white school in a nice, or arguably one of the nicest neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale, versus somewhere that was literally so close to that neighborhood that was just totally different.
But did you feel like, was it shocking, or did you feel comfortable enough? Because I remember having conversations with you, and my conversations with you would have always been, because I remember one day you came home and this girl threatened to beat you for your water bottle.
That was later on, but yeah.
And
sure.
my response to you was that these are your people.
Yeah.
And you looked at me like, yeah, I know that, but how do I? And I was like, no, obviously these are just a different experience, meaning these kids that was coming like from the Sistrunk neighborhood, they weren't no different than you were. It's just that they were raised into a different environment to think differently, not negatively thinking differently, but just to like how they rationalize. And I don't even want to even say rationalize, but how do they settle the issue? Like she wanted to whoop your ass for your water bottle.
But like I'm saying, this is what I'm talking about is like the first exposure was 6th grade, because I rode the bus all throughout middle school. So I'm saying like the first exposure, it was nothing but like, because nobody ever gave me an issue until then. And that was already like, I was already going to graduate that school anyway. But like, it was more just like the like empathy. Like it never was like, I wasn't uncomfortable. I didn't feel like out of place in the sense where it made me uncomfortable. I just knew that like my reality was different than these kids. And it wasn't in a way that...
When you say your reality, are you specifically only thinking or talking of socioeconomics, or you're talking about just culturally, just, how educationally, or the struggles? Because you talked a little bit about struggles in the schools.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
we had like 7 fights every day, like escort only. Like it was like a rough school. But also what it made me realize is that like so many of these kids, like, because how the kids in my program and the parents in the program that I was in would talk, not all of them obviously, but some of them would talk, and like their opinion and perception of these kids was like not correct at all. Like these kids were not all like stupid, or like a lot of those kids were way smarter than some of the kids in my program, but it was just that like maybe their parents didn't know to enroll them in that program or to apply. Maybe they didn't come from, because my school was a magnet Montessori school. So it was like literally a feeder into that program. Like everyone from my school that went to that school was in that program. Like nobody from my school just went there, and like my elementary school just went there and was in like the regular, like, so these kids like were totally smart enough and like just like any of the kids that were in my program enough to be in that program, but maybe they just didn't have the opportunity, or maybe their parents were just not aware to do that.
And I also try to explain to you about the whole idea of neighborhood schools.
Yeah.
That because you live in a certain neighborhood, you're zoned to go to that school.
Yeah.
So a lot of parents, they just automatically enroll their kids in that school that they're zoned for. And even though that school might be a failing school, it might be an F school rated.
Yeah, I think the school, like the general school was rated like a D or like not great. And then my program was rated like a B or something, like a good program.
Yeah, because it was a magnet school that pulled from the elementary school that you went to. So it's just a natural flow from the kids to go, because in Fort Lauderdale, there's a challenge in finding middle school outside of a private school.
Yeah, a lot of kids from my elementary school went to private schools.
And so your understanding of that, and how did that impact you moving forward in terms of finding your tribe? And there's one thing that I've always said to you was, you need and you will find your tribe. And that tribe doesn't necessarily mean they're all black or they're all white, but just finding a place that you're comfortable, where you fit in, where you feel like you belong. And, even talking about the whole racial thing, for me, I was always a very conscious dad about educating you on Black history, educating you on the struggle, and educating you on, because, maybe we need to declare the fact that every time you stepped in my car, every time we were in the car, it was always locked on NPR.
Yeah.
So you
yeah, it
grew up
wasn't
on
like I was
NPR.
like sitting like this, like and not knowing, and then I just like it was more just like being able to like sit there, and also kind of having that moment. Like middle school is when I got into rap music, and I wanted to like explore Jordans or whatever, like all that stuff where I was kind of like I like this and I identify, because I was friends with some of the kids like on the bus. Like it wasn't just like I was looking at them and I was like, oh, I feel so sorry for these kids. Like it wasn't like that. It was just like, damn, like these kids are like literally like the same. Like why are people like why are these other kids that I'm going to school with like think that these kids are so different from us, because they're not. Like so yeah. And also I guess touching on the whole like thing with the news, because my parents were so like on top of having CNN and all that and NPR like on all the time, I definitely was aware of like, I became more acutely aware in middle school and like late, yeah, I'd say middle school actually, of how like, you know, the state of the country, and like, okay, you have the whole George Floyd happen when I was in 6th grade, I think, or 7th grade. And I literally wrote about that in like an essay, because it was mind like blowing for me, like in a racial identity, because I was just like that's like, this man is just like my dad, or like, you know what I mean? Like I identified with it, and it was appalling. Like I thought about him for like, well, I still think about him, but I like, it was
But
just,
what was it about George Floyd that impacted you to the point that it did, and what specifically that you found relatable, apart from the fact that he was a black man and your dad is a black man?
Because when I first, like, obviously George Floyd propelled the whole BLM thing, and then it was like quite literally a trend, like to be involved, like, you know, people that I knew who were never involved or who never cared about that kind of stuff like started to, because it was like, oh, like you should, whatever. But I remember even before BLM like blew up and like all that stuff, like I remember the first like day that the news broke that they had the video playing, like I sat there and I watched it, and because they would show it like over and over and over again, and I was watching it and I was just like, this is going, like this is like gonna change like me, and I really hope that this like starts something. And it did. Like it ended up being like all the protests.
Why was it
I don't know like
George
how
Floyd?
to,
Because
there was
George Floyd was
shootings
just
before that.
a succession of different
I know.
black men were being abused by police.
Because no, and that's a thing.
But why did George Floyd?
I remember like that period of time but right before George Floyd, it felt like every single day, like there was a new guy on the news.
Taylor, you had all those
every
things
like
happening
one
around
after the other, and I was just like, what the heck? Like it was impossible for me to like, when I was like a little kid, and be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like it made me realize, like, beyond just what my dad was telling me, like historically this is why this matters, and this is why this matters to you. It was like for the first time, like me, like it really hitting me, like how much it mattered to me, like how much I wanted it, like for him to have justice, and how much I wanted people to be upset about it, and how much like, and I think just how gruesome and graphic like the video was just like, what are you talking? Like, how can this be like happening? Like, what do you mean?
Because I remember we had conversations about it.
No, it was really bad.
Viscerally upset.
I was crying all the time.
And you had these emotions in reaction to it. Speaking about, going back to the whole racial identity thing, is, you talk about Barack Obama, because at the time, the perception in the white community or the white world was Barack Obama was like branded as integration, branded as.
And I think that's also important from my perception as a child, is like when you're telling me that, I'm black and like that matters because people view me differently and all this stuff. And then you turn on the TV and it's like, we have a black president. Like, Marky, what are you talking about? Like, the world is, we have a black president, like black people are like accepted, like blah, 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 blah. whatever. And then also that changed in middle school when Barack Obama was no more. And I kind of started to realize like, oh, this is not how it's going to be like forever and ever and ever and ever. Like,
but why do you think in your world as a 17-year-old, and we've had this conversation, so I feel comfortable asking you this, is that why do you think in your world of mixed race people, why is Barack Obama being held as this flagship of, for some, because I remember most people use him more as a
I voted for Barack Obama. or what do you mean?
Or for mixed race people, it's like it's like Barack Obama. It's almost like a gateway for people straddling on. You're not black enough, or you're not. You're from a white family. You're not, or it's like. It's almost like he's used as a litmus test, as a barometer of blackness and black consciousness, and the integration of mixed race people feeling, oh, that is my guy. I'm a mixed race, and you can't say anything to me. And black people get up and they're like, girl, you can't be holding no black mantle and trying to act like you one of us, because you're not. You're mixed. You go home to a white mom.
But I disagree with that.
But then they always go back to the Barack Obama syndrome. It's like, well.
Because black people claim Barack Obama as black.
Yeah. And I've had that conversation with you and explaining to you that, a mixed race person as well as a black person, their perspective can both be right.
Yeah.
It's that, but it's understanding the struggle and not the intent. Like the time when you were talking to me about, in the car, we had that conversation about whether or not you were black enough, or you heard something on TikTok, social media.
Yeah, just kind of people like this. It was this one lady just saying how like mixed people like aren't like black people. Like we're not the same because we go with our white moms and we like have internal like hatred like towards the community and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not a good portion of mixed race people who, first of all, make it their whole personality, and second, who do have not just internal hatred, but hatred for the black community in the way that like they have a superiority complex. And I think that goes it's less about a racial thing and more about a color thing, like a colorism thing. Because like you said, like there is light skins, which light skin, people conflate mix and light skin because it's technically not the same thing. Like people use them interchangeably, but light skin is referring to a fully black person who has light skin, and a mixed person is a half white, half black person. So I think, like you said, like light skinned people get confused as mixed or like labeled as mixed, and they're kind of used interchangeably. And a lot of the time are like, when you look at Hollywood, given more opportunities, like are like, Halle Berry is the first black woman to win an Oscar, but she's a light skin. I believe Halle Berry is mixed.
Yeah.
Yeah. A mixed woman, and she's black. And yes, she is half black and she's not a white woman, that's for sure, but she's not, Viola Davis, like that's, so like a lot of the previously closed gates have been open, but to who? A lot of lighter skinned people. And so I definitely agree that there is a colorism problem and prejudice within the community and outside of the community. So I agree with her in the sense that we are treated differently. You're partially right that like white people don't perceive me as white, but at the same time, they don't perceive me as a dark skin or a medium skin or whatever black person. They perceive me as light skin or mixed. And
but that's
they
an
treat me
appearance
differently.
thing.
Yeah,
Because-
but your appearance it matters, don't you think?
Well, yeah, but you have to get your appearance only serves as an introduction. But when you get to a higher frequency of thinking and operating and get to the substance, and colorism, yes, at first blush when someone see you or run into a light-skinned person, yes, is it more acceptable to them? Sure. I come from a world, or I operated
Well, yeah,
and functioned
Jamaica's
in
a
a
little bit
world,
different,
not
though.
even my heritage I'm talking
Oh,
about, but I'm talking the industry that I worked in for a
yeah.
very long time. You know, we remember back then when dark complexion people
Mm-hmm.
weren't given the same privilege as a lighter complexion
Yeah.
person, whether it was in the media, print media, or broadcast media.
Mm-hmm.
They just weren't given those same opportunities.
Yeah.
Later on in the 90s, when you have the Queen Latifahs and people who came from true, and when I say true blackness, I'm just talking purely from a
Yeah.
color perspective.
Yeah.
And so they were able to, you had the gatekeepers
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time who only allowed what they thought was acceptable,
Yeah.
or the assimilated blackness that was able to
The
penetrate white
digestible.
culture
Yeah.
and say to that part of black culture, okay, they're pretty. And what
Mm-hmm.
made them pretty was not their authentic African features,
It
but the
was the
fact that it was,
Eurocentric.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was blended, or
Mm-hmm.
it was watered down into a way where it becomes almost multiracial.
Yeah.
And so that there was that whole slide from the 70s, 80s, where when in the 70s you had the whole, Afro people wearing their natural curly hair, and, black people dressed differently. We were
Mm-hmm.
very much, granted, I wasn't around back then, I was a
Yeah.
child, but, tying themselves back to their African roots and try to accentuate that and celebrate that. And that, for the most part, was almost, you know, thrust to the side because it was just too much into mainstream culture, just wouldn't accept it, was just too much into your face.
Yeah.
Later on into the 90s, then you start seeing a penetration of, people more Afrocentric features
Mm-hmm.
will come through. And, till today, day and age, where you look at major cosmetic campaign, have black
Yeah.
people featured. You didn't have that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
In the world that I came from, I remember back in the 90s, when we went to a casting, and if you were a black person going to cast for going to an audition for a commercial, or even whatever you were auditioning
Yeah.
for, if the roll call for black, Hispanic, and white, you could not go in with a white person
Mm-hmm.
as a couple. You
Yeah.
had to sit in the waiting room till another black person show up, and then you'd go in with a black girl as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Or a white person wouldn't just sit there and go in with a Hispanic. A Hispanic
Yeah.
had to wait for another Hispanic, and an Asian had to do the same thing, because somewhere in Middle America, sitting there in Iowa, or no dispersion to people from Iowa,
Yeah, but
or
whatever. Yeah.
some small town in America, seeing that on their television would be jarring for them. Like, wait a minute, why is
Mm-hmm.
that a black guy? I know. In today's day and age, you see multiracial couple
Mm-hmm.
marriage in branded commercials, or being mainstream on television.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case back then.
To the point where it's fetishized a little bit.
Kind of. So just to take it back to where we started, is that the whole racial identity thing, where mixed race kid or mixed race people find themselves caught into this enclave of not truly belonging to a particular tribe, because white tribes saying, no, you're not one of us, you're not white.
Yeah.
And the black people, for the most part, are saying,
Well, I wouldn't say for the most part.
no. I'm saying the people who have an issue
Yeah. Okay.
of saying, wait a minute, you're mixed.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at you and going, you're not one of us.
Yeah.
We can accept you as one of us, but don't just think it's a birthright
Yeah.
that, like I get up and I could walk into any culture, any black neighborhood, any black enclave, and widely accepted as, oh, he's a brother. Now, a mixed race person, a lot of it has to do with how you look when you first get there. You look like you're a mixed person. You don't automatically get that
Yeah.
street cred, or that cred of like, oh, you're one of us. It has to be earned.
Yeah.
And it's earned in a way that, is it fair or unfair? Because you have the privileged.
Mm-hmm.
a mixed race person has the privilege of both
racial
race.
ambiguity.
Not racial
Sometimes.
ambiguity because they're not ambiguous for the most part.
Well, sometimes racial, like it, like I've had gotten, like someone drops the N word in front of me in a literal history class, a U.S. history class.
But that's
And
ignorance.
okay, no, but listen. And then they're like, "Oh, I thought you were like Hispanic, like brown, like me." And I'm like, so I think that
Well, when you say-
not that Latin people can't be black, but I'm saying more of like if I straighten my hair, or even when my hair was wet one time, like I've had people tell me that they thought that I was not black. Like
No, I get that.
directly.
No, when you say racial ambiguity,
And
I
there's
thought you
lighter
meant-
mixed people than me. You know what I mean? Like Zendaya, like you can always tell. Like sometimes they put a blonde wig on her and she doesn't go outside for a few months and she does not look like obviously black or obviously mixed. You know what I mean?
No, I get you. When you
Okay.
said racial ambiguity, I meant something totally different.
Okay.
What I meant is that, well, because we're talking about the whole idea of what tribe you belong to,
Okay.
you don't have that ambiguity to
No.
say, well, you can blend into that tribe and go, oh, you know, nobody really knows who you are, so you're automatically accepted. No.
Yeah.
There's a struggle to get into that tribe. And, you know, whether it's the white people openly accepting you, saying, hey, you're one of us, or the black person saying, hey, come over here, you're one of us. No, you find yourself in almost this purgatory-like place where it's all about earning the stripe to get into or to feel as if, yes, you truly belong. And is that fair? Of course not. But there's a biological construct
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, when you go and you walk down the street and holding your white mother's hand or you're hugging your white mother and people see you together, something click and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the same time you walk down the street and you hold your black father's hand and someone see you and they go, oh, okay. And that's a privilege you have.
No, I definitely know that I'm privileged.
And when I say privilege, I don't mean in the broader sense
Yeah.
that it brings some great success or opportunity to your life, but I'm talking purely in the racial construct.
No, I agree 100%.
And so when someone see that and, you know, and that we go back to the whole Barack Obama thing is that
he's digestible enough for that period of time.
And Barack Obama was able to exploit the fact that, hey, you know what? I have a white grandmother from Kansas.
Yeah.
And look at me. And I could stand and sit in my white grandmother's living room and have an interview. And white America will look at him and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more palpable because he's from our bloodline. He's from one of us.
But at the same time, my favorite person to bring up, Frederick Douglass, like I never realized or I never knew Frederick Douglass was half white, half black until I read the book. And Frederick Douglass, like I learned about Frederick Douglass as I even want to say like elementary school. Like he's like one of the most like the faces of the whole
Iconic
period of
struggle.
slavery. Yeah. And it's like he's like that. Yeah. The icon, like an icon of struggle. And it's like, well, you know, he's mixed like up into like you look at, I hope I got the case right, but like Plessy versus Ferguson, like a 1/9 or 1/8 or something black man is like, you know, not allowed to sit in the white, even though he's clearly white passing. Like I'm not white passing. Like people who are half and half are not white passing, but this is a white passing man. And just because he has his great whatever grandmother is a black woman, is still like still faces the same struggle in the way of like up until, again, I agree with you in modern time and in the last like decades. Yeah. Like there's definitely a huge privilege of being mixed, like with white or being perceived as mixed. But like back in those days, like you're black, you're a little bit black, you're black, like especially half and half. Like, again, I didn't really look at Frederick Douglass and say like, once I heard he was mixed, I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But like, he was a black slave, like a black, like, okay, his master had a child with one of his slaves and there's Frederick, but like he was a black slave in America. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, understanding history, and especially Black history, it's important to understand the evolution of, the Black experience,
Yeah.
so to speak, and what brought us to today's multi-ethnic, multiracial society, and how we as Black people are accepted or not accepted. I mean, obviously, you could go through the whole Jim Crow
Yeah.
struggle of the South versus the North, back in those days.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, when you have Black men marrying white women
Yeah.
and having children, it's important to be grounded in a way or in a sense that there's two racial identity culminating to form a mixed race child.
Yeah.
And how does that affect the child?
Mhm.
And when that child is born, it's going to take a conscious effort to educate that child, and educate the child in the sense that make that child culturally and racially aware of their identity, not just one cookie cutter whitewashed version of what that kid is. Because I've seen a lot of mixed race kid floating around thinking, acting and
Yep.
just lily white and has no Black experience.
Mhm.
And then when you look at them and then you hear them and you spend time around them, you're like, this child is just lost.
Yeah. And because you're going to face it eventually. I mean, just because it didn't happen in elementary school doesn't mean like, in middle school, high school, like people say mean stuff. Right?
And
Like,
again, when I said that person is lost, I
I
mean,
know.
I don't have, the authority to speak on that person's behalf to tell them what identity they should adopt
Yeah.
and try to walk or navigate through life with.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I do know for me, having a mixed race child, was that it was important for me to educate you,
Yeah.
to inform you, to teach you all the nuances of Blackness. And so you understand that Blackness is not just the color of your skin, but it's a consciousness.
Mhm.
And that consciousness embodied the culture, the knowledge, the historical perspective, and it also uses a filter for how you perceive the world around you and how you express yourself to that world around you. And
Yeah.
again, and one of the things that I always barked on or, always say to you is when we drive through a neighborhood and, because we used to go watch football games because we were heavy into high school football.
Mhm.
We'll go to watch like down in Overtown or Liberty City to
Yeah.
watch, different
Billard, Boyd Anderson, whatever.
Central,
Yeah. Central.
Booker T. Washington.
Mhm.
I mean, and we drive down and you're like, oh man, when we go to those games and we're sitting in the stand, you're like, oh, look at the cheerleaders. These girls dance. They know how to dance. And coming from your school and the school
Yeah, it's just a
football
different
games that
kind
we
of
go, you're
cheer.
like,
Yeah.
oh, these girls they're performing.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at you and we'll sit there and we'll walk around and we'll buy, because you go to those kind of games, they have real food.
Oh
They
yeah,
have,
like good food.
They
Yeah.
have barbecue, they have beans
Like
and
food trucks and
food
stuff,
trucks.
yeah.
And we're like, and you're like, oh, how come we don't do this at these other
my
schools?
my school is like we have hot dogs and
dogs and
hamburgers.
Coca-Cola and all
Yeah.
And I always say to you, look, these are your people and this is your tribe.
Mhm.
And I've always, we drive through and we go to all these different neighborhoods. And I was like, and I remember when you were little, you'd ask me questions like, Marky,
are we in the black people neighborhood?
yeah, I remember we used to drive and you're like, is this the
To
black?
where my grandma lives.
Yeah, we'll go to visit grandma and you'll be sitting in the back seat going, Marky, you're like 4 or 5 years old. Marky, is this where all the black people live?
Oh, the black people.
And I was like, no, why? And
Because Lauderhill, like you drive through, like where we would drive when I was a little kid or go to the grocery store, like you don't spot one white person. Maybe there's a Latino.
you remember that time you're in the grocery store, we're sitting there in the grocery cart, and you're sitting there, you're screaming on top of your lungs, is this where all the black people shop, Marky? I was like, be quiet. And you're like, why? And I was like,
Because it's just an observation.
these are your people. This is your tribe. This is where you come from. And so for me, it was always about having that balance between your white world and your black world, between having your black dolls and your white dolls, and realizing that you are a culmination of both.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to understand both. You need to be comfortable in the room with nothing but black people speaking all kinds of different kind of slang or language, that you're probably not familiar with, but feel just right at home and knowing these are my people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same breath, you could go across the county and sit in a white neighborhood and with white friends and white family and having conversation and felt just at ease on both sides.
And I think I guess to kind of bring it all together, my perception of myself now and how I view all that's happened now is I have a level of empathy and understanding that I'm extremely thankful for, and it serves me very well now. A lot of kids at my school just don't relate to the public school experience. They've gone to Catholic school or private school their whole life, and I'm able to say those kids are exactly the same like you. And also I feel very in touch with both sides of me in the way that the music that I listen to, I'd say, reflects more of a lot of kids at my school are big into country and all that stuff. And I'm just I'm not, I had my little phase there, but I'm not into that anymore. I listen to more rap and R&B and stuff. But at the same time, I hang out with a lot of white friends so just very, very grateful for, although it was hard to get here with figuring out my hair, and I don't want to have straight hair anymore. I don't want to be blonde. I want to have curly, dark hair, and I'm perfectly more than okay. I'm extremely happy to have that and just be completely okay with both sides and extremely thankful for my exposure to such differences and from growing up with you and my mom pulling me in opposite directions to going from a predominantly white school to a predominantly Black and Hispanic school. Just extremely thankful for how well-rounded I was in all of those, and going from ballet to track to rowing, all these bouncing and horse riding, being in all these different worlds with all these different races that make up those worlds. So I'm just ultimately grateful for the struggle and
experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, a good place to leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good conversation. I know that when it comes to racial identity, there's so much more to unpack because we're just now touching just on the surface of the level of conversations that you and I have had over the years regarding race and different experience. But that's something we'll pick up in a different episode, and we'll break that down from a whole different perspective, not necessarily just to deal with your racial identity, but just how racial identity affect your thinking and your interaction with different experiences.
And how I've been a history nerd now that wants to minor in history.
Good. Well, we've come to the end of another long conversation, a very enjoyable one. And we hope that everything that we talk about or discuss is just a matter of reflecting and going back on some of the conversations that we had over the years, and just wanted to share it with other people, with you, the people.
You, the people.
You, the people out there, just to understand how we were able to have those tough conversations, and sometimes uncomfortable ones, because, as a teenager, it's different. It's very different. When she's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, just dropping that kind of knowledge and having it sit and get processed in the way correctly that it doesn't offend and it doesn't deter you from understanding or pursue your own individual goal, but just to understand it, put it in the back of your mind somewhere, and just use it purely as a filter to see to how you process the world around you. So with that, I want to thank you. And again, look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yay.
Stay tuned.